I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where I would share something so deeply personal with someone who, for years, had been nothing more than a distant relative by marriage. My name is Amanda Hayes, and I'm 32 years old. I married Daniel when I was 25, and for a long time, I believed we had the kind of marriage people envy, supportive, respectful, passionate in our own quiet way. But the reality that unfolded in the years that followed taught me how little we can know about the people closest to us. Daniel's father, Richard Hayes, had always been a strong, silent type. He was a retired Air Force officer, disciplined, sharp, and unflinchingly honest. In his early 60s, Richard maintained a physique and composure that demanded respect. He wasn't cold, but he was never the chatty father-in-law type either. My relationship with him had always been polite, formal. We exchanged pleasantries during holidays and birthdays, nothing more. Until one evening changed all of that. It was late autumn when everything started to unravel in my marriage. Daniel began pulling away from me emotionally, physically, and mentally. He stopped coming home on time. He seemed preoccupied and uninterested in anything related to us. When I tried to talk to him, he would dismiss my concerns or tell me I was overthinking everything. But I knew something was wrong. Eventually, I found out what it was. Daniel was having an affair with someone from his workplace, a younger woman named Claire. The discovery shattered me. I didn't confront him right away. I needed time to process it all. I needed to understand how the man I trusted with everything could betray me so effortlessly. I felt completely alone in a house filled with silence and unspoken truths. In the middle of this emotional chaos, Richard came to visit. It was unplanned. He said he was passing through town and thought he'd check in. Daniel wasn't home, he rarely was those days, so it was just the two of us. I wasn't sure how to act around Richard that evening. Part of me wanted to keep everything buried, pretend everything was fine. But something in his eyes told me he already knew something was off. We sat down in the living room. I made some tea, and for the first time in years, we really talked. He asked me how I was doing, and I don't know why, but I broke down. Maybe it was the kindness in his voice or the way he looked at me like I mattered. I told him everything, the late nights, the lies, the affair, the emptiness. I poured my heart out to the man I barely knew, and he listened, never interrupting once. When I finished, he didn't react with anger or judgment. He just said, "I'm sorry, Amanda. You didn't deserve any of that." His words felt like a balm on an open wound. No one had told me that. Everyone else either tiptoed around the issue or advised me to just move on. But Richard didn't offer empty solutions. He sat with me in the pain. That evening turned into a longer conversation that stretched past midnight. We talked about everything: marriage, loneliness, expectations, regret. I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks. There was something deeply comforting about Richard's presence. He wasn't trying to fix me. He was simply there. Over the following weeks, Richard made it a point to check in on me. He'd drop by with coffee or just text to see how I was holding up. We started going for long walks in the park. Sometimes we didn't talk much, and sometimes we talked about things I'd never told anyone, not even Daniel. I began to see him not as just my father-in-law, but as a person with his own scars and vulnerabilities. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult therapy session, I called Richard. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. He invited me over. His home was neat and quiet, filled with books and framed photos of a younger Daniel. We sat on the back porch drinking iced tea, watching the sunset behind the trees. "I used to think marriage was about duty," Richard said, breaking the silence. "You do what you're supposed to do, you stay even when it's hard. But sometimes, staying is the real betrayal." That struck something deep inside me. We sat in silence after that, and for a moment, I felt like I could breathe again. I don't know when exactly the shift happened. Maybe it wasn't one moment but a series of moments strung together: late-night calls, shared silences, understanding looks. One night, it was storming heavily outside. The roads were bad, and Richard insisted I stay the night at his place rather than drive back home alone. He made up the guest room for me. After dinner, we sat in the living room with wine, the thunder rumbling in the background. I was wearing one of his old flannel shirts, and he joked that I looked like a lumberjack. I laughed for what felt like the first time in ages. That night, we didn't sleep much, not because of anything inappropriate, but because we talked for hours. We revisited old memories, talked about missed chances, things we regretted, and what we'd do differently if we could start over. There was a deep emotional intimacy between us that was both comforting and terrifying. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. The next morning, something had shifted between us. We were more careful around each other, more aware. But we didn't cross any lines. We simply acknowledged the connection, unspoken and delicate, like a secret we were both too afraid to name. Over time, that unspoken understanding became a kind of strength for me. Richard's support helped me confront Daniel. I filed for divorce not long after. Surprisingly, Richard never once tried to influence my decision. He respected my space, my pain, and my healing process. He remained present but never overstepped. After the divorce, I moved into a small apartment downtown and began rebuilding my life. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. I even adopted a dog. Richard and I continued to stay in touch, but with more boundaries. The emotional closeness we'd shared had been real, and it had helped me survive the darkest